So I always loved sci-fi growing up. You guys know what that is, right?
Yeah.
So I loved everything that had to do with outer space. So my biggest thing was to go to Kennedy Space Center, because remember I lived in New York, and that Kennedy Space Center is in Florida. So that was far away, obviously, and I never had been. So my dad and my mom said, "All right, Joey, we're going to take you to Florida to go to Kennedy Space Center." And I was like, "Oh man, this is awesome." It was a dream come true. So I still remember that it was like the most fun I ever had, as a kid, looking at the shuttles and the rockets and looking at all that cool stuff. It was super exciting for me. And my parents bought me a shuttle toy. All right, and I'll always remember it because it was all metal. Like nowadays, typically, they don't have toys that are big. They're all made out of metal. They're usually plastic and stuff. Back in the days, the toys were all metal, and so they felt strong. They were super cool, and it was amazing. I loved that toy, the shuttle, all metal shuttle. It was nice. And my dad hired a guy to do some work at the house. And the guy brought his son with him. And his son was a little younger than me. And, like maybe 3 years younger or something. So I remember that I played with him. And I was playing, one of the toys was my shuttle toy. And when it was time for him to leave with his dad, he wanted to keep my shuttle toy. And I was like, no, I don't want him to keep my shuttle toy. And he was crying, I remember. This kid started just crying like crazy. My shuttle toy. And then my dad was like, hey, just give him the shuttle toy here. And my dad took the toy and gave it to this kid. And he left. And I remember I was so sad that I cried that my dad took my favorite toy and gave it to this kid. And, it was one of those things. And my dad was like, hey, you gotta give to other kids sometimes and blah, 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 the typical things. But, man, that was my favorite toy. And I remember I was so hurt that my dad gave away my favorite toy. The end.
Alright, Logan, it's your turn for the story.
Okay. So once
Where's
there was
Logan?